Welcome to the AI First Business Podcast with Tina Yazdi, where we show you how companies, teams, and leaders are turning AI hype into ROI. Awesome. Welcome, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.
Would love a quick intro about both of you and a little bit about Hadrian as well. Klaas, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I have a background in aerospace engineering, which is what I studied for my bachelor and my master at the Delft University of Technology. I branched out. I was doing some research in astronomy. And then actually through Jasper, I got introduced to Hadrian. I was interested in AI. I was using that to solve astronomy problems. And I heard of Hadrian was working on some really cool tech where AI and big data can be a big impact. And so I started working here almost exactly a year ago now. And yeah, since then I've been working here as a AI machine learning engineer as well as data scientist.
For me, I've also studied at the Technical University of Delft. I studied electrical engineering. After this, that I worked on building solar cars for some time. So we built, with our team, we built cars that run on solar power that we race all over the world. Also very data-centric. We calculate everything. And from this, also I rolled into cybersecurity. Started working
Summer, I remember they used to do that competition at the University of Toronto where I went. Osama mentioned you won some crazy prize in that, won some really specific. Am I misremembering something?
Yeah. So last year in South Africa, we won the race over there. I'll be flying out to Australia in a month to get the prize back in the Australian race. So
nice.
Yeah, exciting times.
What's the prize?
The prize, fame. Yeah. So it's really about winning the race. That's all you need. And you get this really big trophy, of course. That's really also what it's about.
Nice. I hope they don't charge you extra to bring it back to the Netherlands.
No, we just take it. It's fine.
Just take it. Nice. Can you share a little bit more about Hadrian and what your respective roles are in the company and what teams you guys are a part of?
So Hadrian is an external attack surface management platform. So what that means is that we take a hacker-centric approach. The company is founded by hackers who have experience doing white hat hunting, which is when you hack your customers, essentially, in order to find vulnerabilities in their platforms. And then you would inform them of those vulnerabilities so that they can patch them, which is in contrast to black hat hackers who find vulnerabilities in order to actually exploit them. We build a system that autonomously does this white hat hacking, which is going to be a lot more effective than just having some white hat hacker pen test your platform every couple months or every couple of years, because this means that if something's misconfigured or if something gets put online, within 5 minutes, our autonomous platform would be able to find that and be able to find that a lot quicker than any black hat hacker would be able to. So that's a little bit about what Hadrian does. And as you can imagine, there's so much data out on the internet. In order to process all of that, it can be very useful to use AI and other data science techniques. So that's me working as a data scientist here in the AI team. And Jasper's actually working on very similar things, including gathering all that data from the whole internet.
I'm more into a regular engineering discipline. I'm definitely not the best developer. I think I'm more of I just like solving hard problems, and usually doing that with code. So again, definitely not the best developer, but I just like solving problems. A lot of the times you also need a lot of data for that. Also some AI. So I also work together with Klaas a lot to make sure that we get the project into production as fast as possible.
We kind of briefly chatted separately about how the teams are structured at Hadrian. Klaas, it sounds like you're part of a group that can be tagged as the AI team. I don't know if that's what you call yourselves. And Jasper, you're kind of tangential, so you're part of more the data side. However, you guys closely collaborate. Can you share a little bit, Klaas, about what functions are on your team? Jasper, what your group focuses on, and how do you guys and when do you guys collaborate together to get stuff done?
We call ourselves the AI team, but also kind of the AI and data team, because the approach we try to take is that if a problem can be solved without using AI, it should be solved without using AI. AI is typically expensive, and deploying these models can have quite some overhead. Therefore, we try to think of ourselves as AI and data, which we all have a strong interest in AI, and I think it's sort of natural to want to use that because it's fun and cool, novel, but we try to solve problems in a simpler way before using AI. So currently we have 3 people in our team here at Hadrian, and we all have our own strengths, I think, within. So personally, I have a really quantitative background doing data analysis and astronomy. And then, for example, TV, one of my colleagues, he's really good at like with deploying these AI models and working on the infrastructure. But nonetheless, we try like all to actually contribute to those different aspects. So I would call myself also a machine learning engineer. I also write production code, and TB also does data science. And Tyler, our other team member, he also works like across the board, whether it's like deploying something or whether it's analyzing some data. And I think in a small team like that, it's really good to have general in a startup. It's good to have generalists who have a big overview. And then I was working together with Jasper on a project where we actually find all the root domains of our customers, which is like quite a hard problem. It wouldn't seem like it from the get-go. It seems like customers would know which root domains they have, which Apex domains they have that they want us to protect. Often they don't. They might have hundreds, or in some extreme cases, even thousands.
Yeah, 5 to 6K is the reckon now.
Yeah,
which is like
Is the average or the like roof?
Oh no, that's like the max. That's the most I've seen part. But that's this huge company with lots of subsidiaries and all kinds of different weird business units. You find a lot of weird stuff. That's what about
implies the scale of manual effort it would take if
yeah, exactly. So that's also what we're trying to make, like a smarter approach. I came up with like the groundwork of this approach some time ago, and we started building it out, and then Klaas also started helping out. All together, we're able to like make some pretty cool things.
Just digging into that a little bit since it's come up, I imagine your laying the groundwork was more from like a data approach, and it kind of like went into an area where the AI team was necessary. Would love to have you maybe break that down a little bit. Like what was the starting point, and at what point did Klaas's team need to be brought in, and kind of where did it land today?
A starting point was actually that I gotta try to not come up with the most simple terms that nobody will understand. So please interrupt me if I do.
Oh, I will ask you to explain the like
perfect
terms.
Yeah, so I had a lot of DNS scanning data. So I had a lot of scanning data on a lot of domain names, like which IP they resolved to, which sounds pretty specific. But I had the idea that we could actually use this data in order to track down the root domains of our customers, because with this DNS scanning data, we actually see in which parts of where on the internet some websites were hosted, and also pull all the websites that were hosted on the same part of the internet. I think that's the best way to put it, and check if they also belong to our customer. So I just made this POC.
It's kind of like mapping.
Yeah, it's actually like a really, really big map. So I made this POC, and good coincidence that there was this customer and they were complaining like, yeah.
Right. Already, POC is, I think, very often used in our worlds, but can you explain what that means?
So more like a proof of concept. So I just made the most shitty, most basic version of the tool with like a lot of manual work. It would take me at least an entire afternoon to find like 20 of these new domains, because I know it was just such a struggle. It would crash all the time. For most organizations, it wouldn't work. But the good coincidence of that was that for one organization that actually complained that we didn't have part of their infrastructure in their platform, that it did work. So immediately I could like prove some value by saying like, hey, I found these domains for them. And everyone was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool, because no idea how we would have found those domains otherwise. How it came together, like mostly starting out really simple. And then I started building it out more and more and more. Also just really like some extra input on other people working on it, because like with more people always have more ideas. And so then Klaas slowly but surely got involved. And then now we're still working on the project.
And to recap, so you built the MVP, like the minimal viable version, to test out the concept.
Yeah, I think an MVP is like a better wording than a POC, but I mean it's also similar.
In spirit, this similar kind of realm of things. And Klaas, how far along was the project when you came into the picture, and from the point that you guys started collaborating, like where did it go?
Yeah, so when I came to the picture, it was like right in its infancy. I think I remember like the organization that Jasper's talking about, just looking at kind of the computer screen. We had this like graph mapped out and kind of like manually scrolling between these different domains. I'm like, oh yeah, look, we found one. Like this domain name looks similar. But then where I came in is to try to automate that process. So build like a model that kind of that first of all combines these different things that we have in the graph. So it goes beyond just like IP addresses, but also other data that we scan and that we have in our databases. If we know that like a certain domain is connected to certain nodes in our graph, that's also connected to things from the customer, how much should we weigh those individually? And then taking it one step further, looking at like comparing the domain names. And then in an even further phase, we actually start like scraping those pages. And then we can analyze the contents of the pages. And then we can say, look, this web page looks a lot like this other web page. Surely this also belongs to the customer, and assigning an actual score to that, which is really easy for a human to do. I think if you look at like a web page of a customer, you might say like, oh, look, this has like kind of their name in the domain, and it's using like this terminology and they have this color scheme. But building that all into like some data science approach where you combine all that information and then come up with a score that says, with this confidence, we think that this page actually belongs to a customer.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite similar to like a social network, what we're trying to do. So like same thing with Facebook friend recommendations. If Facebook sees that you have a lot of friends in common with someone, and that there's like one person kind of missing out, like you have a lot of common connections, then they're like, oh, well, maybe you also know this person. We're actually trying to build something pretty similar, but for internet infrastructure for our customers.
And would you say the way that this project came into existence and developed is a living example of not starting with AI approaches unnecessarily, like starting with the most basic approach and then like only bringing further, like more complicated approaches when absolutely necessary?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, we kind of fell on our face at the beginning by kind of trying to go too much AI. By basically, we tried to use like graph neural networks to do this right from the start. They were kind of like the hottest thing in AI before GCP.
We're like gonna coach you up on a train.
Yeah, exactly.
But not a good idea.
Yeah, we tried that for like a couple of weeks and figured out that our data set just wasn't good enough right now for like that more complex approach, and we really needed to like dumb it down. And then we came up with some really like quick and simple algorithms that didn't have like even such a strong mathematical basis, but just seemed to empirically work. So we just came up with some really simple like if-else algorithms like that, multiplying, adding some numbers together, and then coming up with these scores. And then slowly, as we gathered more data, then we started implementing more like machine learning into the project. So once we collected data from, I think right now we're at like maybe 80 different organizations that we've actually like gone through manually. And now we have all that data, and we can actually train machine learning models to say what the predicted score is. And that's now working a lot better, which makes sense because we have the data to back up those predictions rather than just coming up with something ourselves. But indeed, like we had to kind of start simple and then expand like complexity slowly over time. And I think that's common with AI projects, is that you start with a code base that does stuff manually, and then you slowly just bring in AI more and more, optimize different parts until AI becomes really central to how the whole thing works.
Well, what can be a big issue is if you just try to tackle your problem with AI. I have some data, less AI. It's just very important to also understand, to break down your problem, that you actually know what you're trying to solve yourself. That you can also, before you can estimate where are the gaps in the things that I cannot really write manually, where AI can fill in the small gaps, and just start small, and then over time you can build it out. Especially for building like a good deep learning model, where like black box AI, you need a lot of data in order to make that work. The thing is with new AI projects is that you usually don't have a lot of data. Gathering data is really hard, and especially if you want to just get something off the ground quickly, gathering a good data set would take way too much time. So you first just have to start simple. That's very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this kind of touches on a topic that we chatted about, which is the specific way that Hadrian looks at sourcing ideas for projects like this one, picking one, and the business ROI that they hold teams like yours accountable for. Can you share a little bit more about the project where you were building a solution to like automating finding the millions of domains associated with your, client list? I mean, I think this is like the business value is a little bit obvious here, but can you share a little bit more about like, as you were working through this and pulling in additional resources to work on it, were you held accountable to any metrics? Like, did you have people maybe on the revenue side of the business getting involved also? At what point was this at a level where you can bring in your first beta customer from your client list who's paying you money and the stakes are a little bit higher? And at what point could you, like, if you're selling this, maybe you can share more about that. Like, when could it start to be sold as well? Because I think that's like, for a lot of people, AI, as you mentioned, can be a novelty. But like at the end of the day, you're trying to build a business together. So that's also important not to forget.
Yeah, true. So I think, first of all, it's just so important to show value from moment one. And actually, the first paying customers who were using this tool Actually, that was maybe on like week 3 of the project. Also because out of this project, it's not like it doesn't have to be customer facing immediately, because we do these predictions and then we can also go over them manually before we show them to the customer. So that's actually what we've been doing until from day one. We're actually approaching organization number 100 for which we deploy this tool. We've been deploying it to customers for quite some time. But I think especially in the start, especially like a few months ago at Hadrian or like a half year ago, it was important to like first lay low for a bit, make sure that you actually can show something, because if you just go to...
What do you do by what does laying low look like in your...
Laying low is not going to everyone like, hey, look, I have this sick ID, but I have nothing to show for it. Because then people are like, oh yeah, okay. So what do you want? What do you want? Yeah, that's why at that time I was like doing it on my own. Also discussed that a lot with some of the... That was helping me a lot with that. He's right now our head of sales, but back then but that was everything. Yeah. So first of all, we like identified the relevant stakeholders, so who need to be convinced in order to get this project off the ground. Then also determine like, okay, how can we convince all these people? Because different people need different convincing. Because some people in the financial guy is like interested in way different things than the head of engineering. And you got to keep everyone happy. And so once you identify the relevant stakeholders, they can also like come up with a way on how to show value and show that this project has promise to those people. So that's what we did, and just actually made the most simple POC ever. And I just did a trial run for some customers, and then they just make a presentation like, hey, this is what I've accomplished in 2 weeks. Well, let's see what do you think we can accomplish if we actually will build this out and get it into production in like a good fashion. And yeah, that actually worked quite well.
Just digging into that a little bit more granularly, what did it look like on a day-to-day basis? Did you have like a weekly or bi-weekly standing meeting with the commercial team, this legendary Pata character, for the customers that you brought into like, working alongside of you on the earlier version? Like, who had to approve that? How did you secure their approval? Did you have like set checkpoints with that customer once they were involved? Like, what did it look like kind of operationally to run that?
No, it was definitely a bit less formal than that. Definitely.
Yeah, that's however it looks.
Yeah, definitely a little more informal. Yeah, the thing was mainly just first try it out on a few customers, show them the value, and then just try to convince everyone that this is a cool project and that we can actually make it work. Also, a very, very handy thing was that the commercial team was especially really, really on this from moment one. And that is because the pricing of the platform is directly correlated with the amount of assets they have in the platform. And the only thing we do here is put more assets into the platform. So like the commercial value was pretty obvious. So that also makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's something that's like exciting about this specific project, is that from like day one, basically sales was coming to us and saying like, can you find more assets? Can you find like more assets, please? So it was like, you didn't really need that like formal, it was like very organic.
Yeah. You were solving an existing need that was like very obviously tied to the commercial bottom line. Okay. That's kind of like the perfect alignment. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So that made everything a lot easier. And that also...
That's not the best case scenario, right?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty lucky for sure.
Sir, you had something to say, but my next question is about like, what about a project that isn't so evident from the first moment that it's like super aligned? But sir, you had a comment that you were going to make.
No, sorry. Let's just move on to the next question. What to do with the project that's where the business value is less obvious?
Have you had a situation like that?
Sometimes we did, for example, with that age predictor. Maybe tell me more about that.
Yeah, one other project that we have is, for example, like predicting the age of a web page, which we actually published a paper about a couple months ago. But this is essentially the problem we're trying to solve here, is that we realized through talking to our hackers, which I think is super important to be like in contacts and proactively talking to many different like stakeholders in the company. And we saw that before hacking a customer, they'll essentially go through like lots of web pages and find the old ones in order to hone in on those to try to attack. And it's pretty easy for them to tell like what looks old or potentially vulnerable. But ideally, we'd like to be able to do that. Like, we don't want them to have to spend that time because it's a relatively like simple task. And then also, like, if we can build an algorithm that can do that, we'll be able to scan like thousands of pages, whereas maybe they can only go through like tens or hundreds. So there was like a need there in terms of the hacker side, and we'd like coordinated that with hackers, and then we built out a proof of concept, showed within a couple of weeks or like a month that we were able to predict these and that we're able to find these old looking web pages. We worked with the hackers to get a good test set. But this was something where there wasn't like necessarily immediate value because you're just adding like a new feature that could be used internally, right? So there's not like, it's not customer facing. Now, like we're also rolling that out to customers, but the first instance is not customer facing. And so that's the case where you kind of need to like, there's more like internal management of the project needed, where you really need to talk to stakeholders and make sure that they understand why this is important. Make sure that also you for yourself are convinced that it is important by talking to the right people. And then, if they're enthusiastic about proof of concept, and that gives you like a good feeling that this is something that people want to move forward with. But those type of projects are more like something where you internally need to kind of show that motivation and then like reach out to people.
Yeah, and also if you notice, if you notice that this is not the case, then also don't be too hesitant to kill off the project, because I mean you're only getting yourself if you're continuing a project too long that in the end nobody really wants. I mean that's there's only one loser, and that's yourself.
This is directed at both of you. What advice do you have for someone who may not have done this process that many times on preparing to kind of run it by people, like validating support and correctly reading the room about when it's time to kill off a project, or if the feedback is just indication that they haven't found the right fit and they need to just iterate it a little bit further?
Yeah, I think like key to that is kind of like showing a lot of ownership. So especially if you're new at a company, it might not feel super natural to just book in meetings with a bunch of people, but that's really what I think you should be doing. Just like talk to everyone and figure out like where their pain points. And then also people will come to you where people are like, hey, can't we use AI for this? But then really like kind of like, even though of course you as an AI team want to pick up things, you should almost like push back against them. You should be like, are you sure we can't do like this? Or are you sure we can't use this easier solution? Or like, are you, maybe someone comes to you with something that they think is cool, but won't actually provide business impact. Right? So like just test them on all those things. And then if you validate like for yourself that you think this is something that will make an impact for your customers, at that point, like go like check that out with other people, talk to people higher up in the company, maybe at like C-suite who are really like talking about like product vision, talk to people in the product team, make sure you're talking to a lot of people, gathering a lot of ideas and like pushing back on those ideas. And then if you try to push back on those ideas and they stick, that's the part where you feel like you have something solid that people actually want.
Yeah, and also what you should definitely be able to do is, even though it's indirect, you should be able to like draw a line between. So if you say your project is finished, how is it going to impact the bottom line? Like how is it going to impact the revenue of the company? It doesn't have to be direct, but I mean, if you're like making the life of the hackers easier, well, that's like that can impact the company, because if the line of the hackers is easier and they can find easier vulnerabilities easier, for example, then that will increase the revenue. You should be able to like find a path like that. And if you cannot find a path like that, then you should probably be reconsidering what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's such an important shout out. There's this kind of interesting emerging debate about, and this is going to look different for every company, is an AI team an incubation and enablement team or a service team? So for some companies, it's really great that you can build these products and roll them out to the rest of the organization or other teams. But if those teams don't have the capability to like manage it over time, the AI team then kind of switches into this like service center where they're also like, they build it, they roll it out, they got all of that like cleared, but now they also become like a maintenance and service team. And then there's this other type of AI team, which is kind of like an incubation and enablement. So they'll like incubate, build, and roll it out. And there might be a transition period where you have to like enable the other teams to like take it over. But the intention is finally to hand it off. And of course, in some situations, it's kind of a hybrid model. What are your thoughts on that? And am I missing maybe another type of setup that was not included in those categories?
Yeah, so I think in a startup, it's actually pretty key that like you're not doing like pure research, you're not doing only like incubation, but actually that you take like full like kind of like end-to-end ownership of projects. Because in a startup, like everyone has like too much to do, everyone's got a lot on their plate, and everyone's still figuring out like what we actually need to be doing. So therefore, I think it's like really important also for the team to learn about like what's important, that you actually like own the product like start to finish. And that would include servicing. So there's a like MLOps is a really like trending topic right now, and that's essentially like serving these models and retraining them automatically, checking if they're degrading over time. And I think that's something that, at least in a small company, the ML team should be taking kind of ownership of. So in larger companies, you might have an ML team that's purely research-based, where they're doing like basically just working in Jupyter notebooks and inventing new algorithms. That's something we try to get away from at a startup, because if I just like build a cool Jupyter notebook, that's not going to actually make an impact, as Jasper was talking about, like to the bottom line. But we actually need to like see it through and make sure it kind of like gets to the finish line to the point where it's actually impacting customers. And that's also, I think, for me personally, something that's more rewarding than only working on kind of like the modeling and then letting someone else decide about how it gets like put in the product. I think for me, it's more exciting to be like from that incubation stage all the way to like, how does it actually look in the product?
Building on that point that you just made, it sounds like traditionally it is kind of this handoff model where people more on the ML and data side are like the brain behind it, but it's always like the product team or other teams that are like implementing it. And I've also heard that there's a little bit of a tragedy because the teams that laid the foundation are not often credited with the work that they did. It's the team that implemented it, which is usually not the same team. Can you share maybe a little bit more about your observations? Like, do you think there's a transition in how teams at companies like Hadrian are collaborating to make it a more integrated model where like the ML teams and the teams building the algorithms are more integrated into the product and engineering team that implements the final result? Do you think you guys are an outlier? Like, where do you see the best in practice structure kind of evolving towards?
Yeah, what I see through my like network is that people are like moving towards kind of having like that end-to-end ownership. So that could be like literally training the neural network and then going out to like a customer and then deploying that for them. And I think that's the right way to go, especially for smaller projects. If you're doing like really fundamental research, then surely you just need people who are thinking really hard about the math side of things for like years. But I think in terms of like making business impact and also maybe for personal like professional development, in order to understand like the end-to-end sort of like project lifecycle, I would say that things, especially at Hadrian, are like moving in the direction of, you know, we try to work with everybody and try to make sure like we're having those conversations with product, we're having those conversations with like other key stakeholders, we're having those conversations with like DevOps engineers, having those conversations with other teams, like working as like an ecosystem. But then also like within that ecosystem, within that like connectedness, like kind of like being like personal owners, taking like responsibility for certain features.
Yeah, also I think like more on the point you made, like servicing other teams versus like building up things yourself. I think at Hadrian we have like a mix because we have, I think the person we're on together, like the AI, like more a service to project that we call Expert are building up. Like more like a small part of it, but with the VPI AI, it's like more of an AI-centric project that is, well, that the AI team has come up with, where like AI is plays the central role. So I think we have also with respect to that, we have a mix of projects.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I think it's important there that even though I'm like servicing that project, that I'm like integrally kind of involved with like planning the project.
No, of course, always
like, you know, you have that like close collaboration together.
No, you should definitely be collaborating like very, very closely to make sure everything is integrated, because it's probably not going to work if you just trace a model. We're like, here you have the model, and then you just implement somewhere. I mean, you need a feedback loop because lots of stuff goes wrong all the time. Doesn't work. Doesn't produce the right results. Well, in order to like catch that at an early moment, you just have to keep on iterating. And for that, you just need to close collaboration.
I mean, maybe my understanding of the workflow is limited. I mean, it is limited. But when I think about this, the natural kind of capacity choking effect of this comes to mind, which is that if you can't call projects done, right, like they're just constantly forever open and require your involvement to survive, at some point, I mean, either you have to, like, you just have to keep adding headcount to your team to like take on this like linearly growing like amount of work, right? Like it's never growing smaller or getting to like a plateau. Is that kind of something that you faced, or am I just completely misunderstanding? Or do some things like kind of enter a steady state that need like minimal intervention, like once a month? Like, how is that kind of like looking for you today?
Yeah, definitely. So at the beginning, it was like a lot of experimentation. It was just like constantly playing around and seeing if we could get good algorithms when the AI team started at Hadrian like a year ago. But now we're like, as you said, we're at a phase where there's certain like maintenance activities that needs to be done. Like there'll be a bug somewhere, or like some dependency has changed. And then indeed, that means that like one of us needs to go in and change, work on that. We try to make that like through good coding practices, which I think Hadrian is pretty good at. We try to make that like as minimal as possible, that when other things get changed, that they won't impact our project too much. But that's not like, that's not completely feasible. And then of course that does mean that, once you have like more and more projects running, you will just encounter more and more overhead. Yeah. But the question is then like, where do you offload that overhead to? You could offload that to like an engineer outside of ML. I think if you have someone within ML that actually has like a very good like understanding of how that project works and maybe even develop that project themselves, that's where you'll be like more efficient than someone else.
You said your team, you mentioned early in the conversation that for a company at the size of Hadrian and the type of team that you are, generalist type of profiles are usually the best fit. On that note, can you share, like, for either you specifically or your team overall, what would you say are the main pillars of your work? Like, let's say like research, building MVPs, building things that are meant to go into production, working with clients, and maintenance stuff. Like I kind of created those out of the air, but how would you define like those pillars, and what would you say like in an actual week is your time division between all those different tasks? Like 30% of my time is maintenance, 30% is coding. Like what does that look like for you today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it varies like a lot. It really depends on like the time period we're talking about. I have like June and July, we were kind of gearing up for a big conference that we were attending. And at that point, like my work was,
right?
Yeah, that is Las Vegas, yeah. So we were really gearing up for that. And that meant that a lot of new features were getting shipped, including two that I like intimately worked on. And that means like a lot of maintenance, essentially. Like it's a lot of working with people, a lot of like writing production code, a lot of like reviewing pull requests. It's really a lot of like making sure that everything is working properly. And so during those 2 months, I would say there wasn't much actual research. But now, for example, the last like couple of weeks, I've been just doing more research where I'm looking at like new features that we can actually launch, because those features that we did work on now are like running and they're stable. So overall, I would say you try to like reduce the amount of time that you spend on maintenance by just writing things the right way. Maybe I would put that at like 20%. And then, so that would be like maintenance, like looking back at projects that you've already created. And then maybe the rest is split like evenly between collecting data, modeling, and then actually writing that into like a model or validating that model and then writing into something that's actually useful and creating a business impact within Hadrian. So there's all those different aspects, and it will really depend on like where your team is at right now, how mature is the team. At the beginning, you'll just be doing like a lot of research, and then over time, like that kind of shifts.
Yeah, for me, it's also going all over the place. But it's definitely shifted more towards like talk to people like a lot of the time. Also because the feature we're working on is also like slowly but surely getting like a very nice dashboard page. But in order to have a nice dashboard page, it needs to be running in the back end. It needs to be front end. It needs to be designed.
A dashboard page.
Yeah.
Is that for clients?
Yeah, for clients as well.
Or for clients, okay.
Both. Yeah, to go through that whole process to like get your vague engineering work, because like half a year ago, I wouldn't have any idea on how to present this well to the customer. And then you just have to work together so much with people to get it, to actually present it to the customer in a nice way. Because then also not only my colleagues need to understand, but actually like people who have never seen it need to understand exactly what you mean. And that's just a whole different challenge. So right now it's just also a lot of that work, but also still definitely a lot of development work. Research, not so much. Yeah, sometimes a little bit where you need like some new ideas to implement something. Then sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board, but that usually won't be like a super long period of intense research. That's not really, especially not for this project. Also just because we need to get going, build out more features. Yeah, that's also important.
On that note about coming up with ideas for new projects, I think this is a nice segue to novelty versus usefulness, which we discussed a moment ago. Can you think of some examples that maybe you've seen in the marketplace or encountered personally of being misled by the shininess of AI and having it be implemented for novelty? I mean, you actually did give an example earlier where it shot you in the foot. How do you think about that? And what hygiene practices have you developed as of the present day to guard against that kind of like misleading approach?
Yeah, well, actually, the worst example of this I've ever heard was, I know, some AI competition, and somebody submitted this solution, and I was reading through it, and I know somebody else also was a Reddit or something asked like, but this isn't AI, right? Or why do you solve this with AI? It's like, yeah, there's no reason at all to solve with AI. It was an AI competition, so I just had.
Do you remember the name of it?
Like, come on, guys. Oh no, I don't remember where I found it, but I still vividly remember it because I was like, oh yeah. This is everything that's wrong with AI at this moment. Like, come on, guys. Taking a super simple problem and just doing like, AI, come on, we can do better.
Yeah, internally at Hadrian, we've also experienced that with at least one project where we were thought there was like an idea that was kind of put out there to basically classify all the pages that we scrape, because we go out and scrape all these pages of our customers looking for certain things, whether we can like classify those as being like in these different classes, such as being a login page, a web app, or we had some others. And then, so we did put some engineering effort into that, and we were able to develop like a good algorithm. Once we were done with that, we thought like kind of like in that waterfall engineering mindset where you're like, okay, I finished my part. I'm going to like push it on to the next stakeholder. Like let's put it in production, then let's like show it to the customer. And then we started running it to people who were like, okay, but like, do we actually want this? And then eventually it was just taken out of the product. So that was just wasted engineering time. But that was like a really good lesson for us to learn, where it's like, now we work a lot closer with our like excellent product team, where we're just talking to them all the time. And when we're doing like strategic planning for the AI team, like they're literally there with us talking about like which projects are useful, which are not, and then also like exactly like thinking about, does AI even need to be used here? Can we maybe think of another solution? And I think that's where kind of like making sure that you have the right people in the room. Also having people that are like very critical in the room. You want people in the room that are gonna tell you like, hey, I think this project will take too long, or I think you're working like too much on this, or I don't know if that thing's actually interesting. And then having those like difficult conversations and having just like smart people in the room that are like also working on that product vision.
Was that the origin of kind of what led to the situation today where you've become integrated into the implementation part of the...
Yeah, totally. Like, we started kind of like our own team that was sort of modular, and we kind of just worked on projects that we thought were cool. And slowly we've become more and more integrated, and we found like more and more ways to do that. So part of that includes like when we're doing strategic planning for our team, having like people from outside of the team being there. And then also like before developing a solution, making sure to talk to lots of different people. And it's like we're getting like better and better at kind of making sure that we're not like this modular team that just has that kind of like innovation hub feel where you just kind of create something and then throw it out to the rest of the company, but where you're really like working with the rest of the company to develop something that's gonna like make an impact.
A little bit of a change of topic. I'm kind of like moving towards career. But before going to that, I think I have a few cheeky questions. I'd love to get both of your perspectives on when you look out of the market at other tech companies or even other types of companies, what company do you think is leading the way into being structured to best support AI workflows and AI teams? And that could either be like a team that's building AI products for other companies, or something like Meta, where they have the resources to build, any type of AI team that they want to. Do you have any companies that you look to like, oh yeah, they're getting it right? Like it's not perfect, but they're getting it,
The obvious example here is OpenAI, because they came in and like completely disrupted the market, despite the fact that the technology that they're using wasn't that new. Like they had some really cool ideas around how to kind of like use it and how to do the training. But nonetheless, they're able to come in and kind of like disrupt the whole market where, these bigger companies you're mentioning like Meta and Google were maybe a bit complacent and didn't manage to do that. And OpenAI doesn't actually have a huge team. I think they only have they have less than 1,000 engineers working there, which is like very small amount for the kind of impact that they've had. And I think that really shows that, especially in AI, you don't necessarily need like huge teams, and you just kind of need to move fast. And one thing I really liked about their approach was also that they're constantly iterating. Like the model that you'd use now is different than the model that you used half a year ago. and the way you interact with that model is also different. They're going to deprecate like a lot of the things that were accessible to developers just like 3 or 4 months ago. That was like the state of the art, and now they're saying they're going to deprecate it soon. So they really just kind of like put something out there and then got feedback on it and then like started iterating. And I think that's sort of like a much larger scale of we're trying to learn at Hadrian, which is just build something, like put it out there and like observe whether like, is this having impact or not? And then you can like go in and kind of like work on it rather than having, I think larger companies can be bogged down by this like waterfall approach where it's, you know, I'll like develop this AI thing and then I'll just throw it over to another team till I don't like see what they want to do with it. And then things just get slow.
Yeah. Yep. Jasper, do you have any perspective on this as well?
Not too much. I'm not very into all AI companies, and I also think it's just very hard to estimate how other companies are operating under the hood, because every company out there nowadays is going AI. But like I have no clue how's actually working there. So I mean, I think OpenAI is a good example where they're obviously doing some things very, very good. But for other companies, especially like other security companies, I just wouldn't have a clue. Can be very But I'm not too hopeful for most.
Actually, I mean, yeah, that's actually the reason this podcast exists. No one has a clue, and hopefully, through these conversations, they'll bring a little bit of light to what the hell is going on. Thank you for sharing that as well. And I'm kind of going over to career advice. You guys have given a ton of really great advice that I'm sure a lot of people will be like taking notes on and copycatting in terms of like how do you come up with projects, pitch them, have buy-in, and sense check that, you know, there's like, you know, 360 business value, and then, you know, how do you work with other teams? For anyone who's listening who might be kind of like a bit earlier in their career, maybe they're still in university, but they're curious to find a role like the ones you guys have currently, or find a team like Hadrian. Do you have any advice like of things that they can do to prepare, what skill sets they should make sure to optimize for, and what companies like Hadrian look for when hiring for teams like yours?
I definitely think the most important thing, but I don't know if that's necessarily a learned skill. It's just an intrinsic motivation to solve problems in any sense. I think that's just so important that it's just in your nature that you just want to fix it. You just want to get it done. Of course, there's a lot that can be learned. One thing that's most important is like, don't take the extra class in college, but just go out and do stuff. That's way more important. Just pick up personal projects, try to come up with cool things, build them out, challenge yourself. I think you learn so much more from that than from uni. Classes are definitely important. I've learned a lot of stuff in uni that I can apply every day, but it doesn't teach you how to go into a problem with like a blank sheet, because if you do a project in uni, then you always get this project book, like you get guided through the steps. But if you're going to work for a company, definitely in a startup, then you're thrown into a deep void and nobody really checks up on you. While sometimes like every week it's like, hey, how's it going? You're not going to get any answers from someone. Like that's not going to happen, especially not on the topic you're working on, because you wouldn't be fixing it if it was already solved, you know? So just you have to be able to work with, especially startups and large companies, it is probably easier. But you have to be able to work with a large degree of uncertainty, and you have to be able to fix problems yourself, go on Reddit, I don't know, sort of come up with some ways on how to get answers and be very good at Googling. You just need to be very practical as well in solving issues, problems, whatever.
Yeah, one thing me and Jasper also talk about all the time is like both of us have a lot of experience working in student teams. So he was mentioning that earlier with the solar car racing. I think like that for students is something where if you learn to like work in teams like that and solve like more ambiguous problems, including like if team dynamics might be off, or feel like people in the team are not doing the right thing, or you feel like you need an adjustment in strategy, whatever it is kind of like coming together as a group and solving those problems, and then learning what you as an individual can contribute and like what your role is in those groups. I think those skills like have probably helped me a lot like in my professional life. And I think for Jasper it's the same. Like we're always talking about this. We're always like, oh, in my student team, like this and this happened, or like this is just like this. And I think that's something where if you just kind of like Jasper said, just start solving problems. It doesn't matter if it could not be an engineering problem. It could be like in your sports team or whatever, where it's just where you just come together as groups and like solve problems that will help you become a more effective professional, I think.
Yeah, that's also very, very important. Just especially in a startup, just being able to work with other people in a good way. I mean, issues are going to rise. You are going to be unhappy at sometimes. You're like, come on, what's happening? We need to do this better. Then you need to be able to act on that as well, and make sure that you can implement changes. And, get other people behind your ideas, stuff like that. Just very important.
Yeah, and you gave some nice examples of different environments that can enable someone to develop that skill set. So thank you for that advice. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate it. I think we've covered all the major areas that we had kind of aligned on. Is there anything else that's popped into your minds during this conversation that we should also touch on, or anything we may have missed?
Yeah, I think just as a general note, the whole concept of taking ownership is very undervalued, and not a lot of people are actually taking ownership. Because it's very easy that when you ask someone else to do something and they don't do it, you're like, oh yeah, but this person, they fucked it all up. You have to be able to also hold yourself accountable if other people don't do stuff for you. So you just have to, especially if it's your own project, you just have to have complete ownership. Make sure to check up on people, and so you don't get any surprises, because people are going to forget that they had to do something for you. You just have to be on top of things. You just have to make sure that other people know what they can expect from you, what you expect back, set expectations. And that is just so important to functioning well in any company, I think. And it's also really appreciated if you actually take this ownership and don't, if you see some issue there, you're like, somebody else will fix it. Just get it done, take ownership. Just do it.
Have you guys heard of or read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, who's this Navy SEALs? I mean, I don't think you need to read it because that's what you just.
Actually, we've been told a lot of this by Matan, and Matan is he's also been an army officer for 7 years. So yes, I think they both really come from the same perspective,
same background. That's a really important thing to remember. It's very easy to blame other people. And sometimes it's even objectively right, but if it's not helping you achieve the result, it's not useful. So
yeah, also other thing I think is very important is just being able to, or also actively searching feedback from your environment. This is also something that very little people do. Even less people do that than actually taking ownership. I mean, how are you ever going to improve if you don't know what you have to improve on? Yeah, step one is actually you wanting to improve, because if you're like, I don't care, I'm fine with how it's going, then of course you're never going to get anywhere. So that's also very important to, first of all, acknowledge that there are definitely probably some areas, even though if you think you're doing quite well, in which you can do even better. Then also actively searching feedback from other people to see how you can actually improve this, and make sure that you're next year you're a 10 times better engineer.
Klaas, do you have any final thoughts as well?
I totally agree with this concept of taking.
Totally agree. Yeah. I mean, just to summarize what you said, make sure I understood. It sounds like it's not enough just to be technically brilliant at workflows, mastery of the newest AI technology. It's also the mindset that you bring going to be a critical part of it that maybe is not talked about as much. And you highlighted different types of mindsets that would be important to the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, being critical of what other people tell you, being critical of the way that things currently work. I was working on improving that, and most of all, being critical of yourself. I try to do that all the time. When something doesn't, just being honest with yourself. Hey, I could have not worked on this in this way. I could have, just being my archest critic and just making sure I don't make the same mistakes again.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this is a really interesting conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Yeah, I think we can wind it down here.
Yes. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. It was fun.
Thanks for listening. If you've gained value from this episode, please drop us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a like on YouTube. See you for the next one.